Joining me now is David Dennis Jr. He's the senior culture editor at News One. David, welcome to the Young Turks.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem. So, David, you write about a variety of issues and read some of your recent articles. The one I want to start with is about Dave Chappelle, because we were just talking about it on the show in one of our post games or something, and I watched his Sticks and Stones special on Netflix too, and so I feel like as conflicted as you sound a little bit in the article as well, right? Because I love Dave Chappelle and I want to root for him, but I felt it wasn't that funny, right? And I want to get into why. But what's your take on what's happening with Dave Chappelle?
So Dave Chappelle is somebody who is one of the most brilliant comedians that we've ever seen. Has been my favorite comedian for a long time. And one of the things that sort of elevated him to this pop culture phenomenon was that he left the Chappelle show when it was widely popular in the early 21st century because of the fact that he refuses to sort of listen to audience. He does not do what people tell him to do. And we've seen sort of the inverse of that with this Netflix special, in that he is reactionary. He is making jokes about cancel culture, quote unquote, about the Me Too movement, about the LGBT movement, mostly because he feels as though he's reacting to the audience. The audience is upset with this and he wants to prove to them that he can be funny. And the sad part about it is that those are the jokes that really were the least funny. I mean, we can argue about if you're offended or not, and that's really, for those communities to say, and they, yes, are offended. But also those jokes just really are not funny. I mean, he has these moments where he is really profound and really brilliant when talking about opioid addiction. He's hilarious talking about Jussie Smollett. But when he calls the LGBT community alphabet people, it's just not funny. And then he goes into this Chinese impersonation that is based on these old stereotypes. It's not creative, it is below him. And it's really what makes the special very uneven and ultimately disappointing for a lot of people to watch.
Yeah, but David, I think it's a broader phenomenon than Dave Chappelle, right? Mm-hmm. So like a lot of the right wing doesn't get it. They think, oh, you guys want all the comedians to be politically correct, et cetera. No, I loved how irreverent and oftentimes offensive Dave Chappelle was on his show on Comedy Central, because it's comedy, we get it, right? And look, a lot of people disagree with me, but I think that why do I keep blanking on his name? The guy who did Office, the British guy. Thank you, Ricky Gervais. Yeah, Ricky Gervais. I saw a special. I thought it was hilarious, even though he said the same kind of offensive things as Dave Chappelle did, but he said it in a funny way. But even he's lost his mind a little bit, and I think it's Twitter that's driving them crazy. And so they keep saying like, hey, don't say those jokes, or those jokes hurt my feelings, and it consumes them. Bill Maher, almost all these comedians are like, how dare you? And they're all collectively yelling at the audience. It's such a weird phenomenon.
Yeah, I mean, you think about comedians and the ideas that the audience has thin skin. The audience can't handle the truth. But when the audience tells a comedian, hey, that joke isn't funny, they sort of go into these rants and tantrums, right? About telling us that something is funny. Well, what makes a great comedian is somebody who can read the room, right? If you're in a room and people aren't laughing, you need to adjust your material. That's why you tour your material across the country. The problem is these comedians are refusing to listen to the audience. The audience isn't laughing, then you're not doing a good job. You can't tell an audience that something is funny if they are not laughing. And these comedians seem to be having a difficult time adapting to this climate in which you get real-time feedback, and you get a little bit more feedback and more realistic feedback from a wide array of audience than you're used to getting. The only solution for a comedian is to adjust your material and make people laugh. And if people aren't laughing, then that's really a me problem if you're a comedian.
Yeah, and that's why I thought your piece was so interesting, because that's why, like you pointed out in the article, that's why comedians go and try out their stuff all across the country, because they want to make it better and better and better. That's why it's a craft. That's why it's a profession. And so, and a lot of comics get annoyed if amateurs come in and think, oh, I'll just do it. No, you got to practice, you got to hone it, you got to see how the audience reacts. And if the audience doesn't react well, yelling at them doesn't really help. And I felt like Dave's entire stand up there was explaining why a joke is funny, which is like the least funny thing on the planet, right? So guys, just let it go, move on with your life. Yes, did we hurt your feelings? It's so ironic because they're offended, and hence they're like, oh yeah, how dare you offend me? I'm gonna offend you even more. Okay, well, how about you don't take offense and move on with your life? All right, so that's Dave Chappelle, but I love what you wrote about it because I thought it was really trenchant observation about not being able to read the room. So now let's go to JayZ. So you wrote about him as well. So for folks who don't know, give us a little background here. Go through JayZ's history a little bit in terms of capitalism versus activism, and then we'll get to his deal with NFL.
So JayZ has an interesting rap career, right? JayZ has spent most of his career, like a lot of rappers, sort of talking about the ways in which you can better yourselves through capitalism, through making tons of money. I mean, that's part of what makes music great, and a lot of what makes hip hop great is this idea that it's aspirational, right? And JayZ has always had these dreams that sort of surpass a lot of what the average rapper had, right? In 2001 on the Blueprint, he rapped about being a 100 millionaire, which at the time was sort of unheard of, right? He was talking about his clothing companies and his businesses and owning Def Jam. And JayZ has gone on to be a part owner of NFL teams. And his central goal has been capitalism. And for him, he said in 2013 that his presence is charity. The idea that if he can open doors for himself monetarily, then that can sort of have this Obama effect of allowing people to believe that black folks could be in these rooms, right? The criticism is that JayZ has not had as much of a focus on activism as we would like. That has sort of changed in the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement when he was doing a lot of things to sort of combat criminal justice. He was sort of helping Meek Mill get out of jail. He was offering lawyers for 21 Savage. He was, really seemingly trying to affect some real change outside of these systems. And it's sort of impacted the way we look at him. We sort of look at JayZ as more of an activist. Now, when he does this deal with the NFL to sort of quote unquote bring more social justice to it, it's sort of a twist in the back. I mean, he was wearing Colin Kaepernick jerseys. He was going against the NFL saying, we don't need you. He was telling people not to perform at the Super Bowl. And now he turns around and does this deal. And it's the idea that this is the capitalist JayZ rearing his, for a lot of people, rearing his ugly head again.
Yeah, so my guess is, and you talk about this in the article too, like that he, of course he defend himself. Although, my God, that comment of my presence is charity, I understand it ideologically, but man, does that sound smug. It sounds unbearable. Like, I have graced you with my presence. That alone is charity.
Yeah, and I think he sort of realized that later on. I think he sort of has tried to, I think that had a profound impact in his career. I think he saw the backlash to that. And I think that sort of one of the reasons he was trying to be more involved with Black Lives Matter the last few years.
Well, okay, let me actually put it this way, David. So when I look at the whole history of JayZ as you laid it out in your article, I thought, I wonder if the activism part was just because that was hot. And it kind of like Nike supporting Colin Kaepernick. It was good for business. And so being like, if he wasn't an activist and didn't support the African American community, it would have been bad for business. And then he lands this monster deal with the NFL to basically whitewash their record. And then you begin to think, well, now when I put it all together, it looks like maybe it was all about business all along.
Yeah, I mean, the NFL deal really sort of has to, make us give JayZ's whole career another look. I was somebody who was very critical of JayZ for the My Presence is Charity idea, and the idea that he believes that if he makes the most money possible, that will somehow trickle down to the rest of the African American community. But I was leaning away from it. I was sort of, all right, you're doing all this stuff in the last few years. You're providing lawyers in secret to Michael Brown's family and all this stuff. But now you look at the NFL deal, and it does lend itself to some cynicism here. Like, how much of that was legit? How much of that was Beyonce pushing you to do that? Because we know that Beyonce's record is a little bit different than JayZ's. I mean, she's been more prone to these activist movements. And then we wonder if he was just positioning himself for more leverage for a deal like this with the NFL.
Yeah, and that's disconcerting. Now, it doesn't take away the good stuff he did, because that stuff is really valuable, and I'm super glad he did it. So, but last thing about this, David, how much more responsibility do African American athletes, celebrities, etc. have? Because I remember I got upset at LeBron James for not speaking out more when he was in Cleveland and Tamir Rice was shot. Now later he went on to speak out more about other events, right? But I'm like, look, if you sit out a game, everyone in the country is going to talk about Tamir Rice. If you don't say anything, well, Tamir Rice goes away, except for the people who are either in that community or care about that community, right? So, but then on the other hand, is that fair to put on all African American celebrities and athletes?
I don't think it's necessarily fair to put on all the African American celebrities, because I mean, people have to fight their battles as they come to them. I mean, every little bit helps, right? And it's not really fair, because we do not put that same pressure on white celebrities when, thinking about the murder of Tamir Rice is a white supremacist structure problem in which white folks need to address just as much as black people. So putting that on black celebrities, I believe, is unfair. What makes JayZ's position unique is the fact that he had positioned himself as somebody who was sort of anti-NFL and aligned with Kaepernick. He laid in front of the world and made this stance of solidarity. And so doing this is, yes, definitely seems like a betrayal and seems like something that is letting everybody down. But I think in general, we have to sort of allow these celebrities to sort of come to this on their own, and whatever they can do is great. I mean, LeBron James cannot be a catch-all for all of these issues. Whatever he's doing, the school that he does is great. The issue with JayZ was that at a time it seemed like he was doing nothing, right? So we have to sort of meet these athletes and these celebrities where they are. But also, if we're going to put pressure on people, I think we need to put pressure on everybody, because this is a problem. Racism, homophobia, all these things are problems that affect everybody. And I think everybody needs to speak up about it.
Yeah, and I don't want people to get me wrong. LeBron's done some great stuff since then, and it's incumbent on all athletes and anybody with a platform to speak out. He spoke out. Kyle Korver has a brilliant article that he wrote. He's a white basketball player, but he talked about structural racism, et cetera, and what he's learned from his fellow athletes, et cetera. So applaud the folks who do great work. And so, David, thanks for joining us, man. Everybody, check out David's articles on News One. They're really brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on the Young Turks and talking about it.
Oh, for sure. Thanks a lot for having me.
Absolutely. 2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below. Then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.